I used to think being quiet was a kind of superpower. If I just kept my head down, stayed in my lane, didn't cause trouble, maybe they'd stop looking at me like I was some kind of disappointment. That's how it's always been in my family. The loud ones got the praise, the shiny ones got the hugs, and I learned to live in the shadows. My name's Emily Carter. I'm 29. I live in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens, New York, or at least that's what I let everyone believe. It's easier that way, safer. But here's the thing. I don't actually rent. I own the building. I also run a health tech startup that's about to go public. We're already serving over 20,000 patients a day. Not that anyone in my family knows. If you ask my mother, she'll tell you I'm still figuring things out. My brother is a lawyer on Wall Street. My sister just got her PhD from Columbia, and I'm the one who plays with computers. That's what she calls it. Playing. As if I'm 5 years old and building something out of Legos instead of managing a company worth more than most of them could imagine. At family dinners, I sit in the same seat I've always had. Corner of the table, right next to the coat rack. I listen to their stories about deals closed, grants won, papers published, and when it's my turn to speak, someone usually interrupts, or the conversation shifts, or Dad looks at his watch and says, "Let's wrap this up." So I learned to stop sharing. I smiled. I passed the mashed potatoes. I asked about their projects and nodded when they said things like, "You should really think about getting a real job." Funny thing is, I have a real job. One I created myself. A platform that connects patients to care faster than anything else on the market. A system we built with no outside funding at first. Just me, my laptop, and a small team of misfits who believed in the mission. We called it CareBridge. And every single day, it helps someone's grandmother get to a doctor on time. Every single day, it proves that I'm not the failure they think I am, but I never told them. Not once. Why? Because part of me wanted to see how long they could look through me and not see what I've built. It became a kind of test, a silent one. And trust me, I've had years to perfect staying invisible. The truth? It hurts. No matter how successful you are, there's this tiny voice inside that still wishes someone had said, "I see you. I'm proud of you." Ever felt like you had to hide your success? Hit subscribe to follow this story. Because the night everything changed, the night my parents stood up and told me they were cutting me out of their will, was the same night. I found out my company was valued at over $100 million, and I didn't say a word, not yet. But I remember exactly how it felt. Let me tell you what happened next. Every year, like clockwork, we had dinner at the old Carter brownstone out in Long Island. The place was huge, with tall windows and creaky floors, and smelled like lemon polish and expensive regrets. My parents always made it feel like a performance. Everything had to be perfect. Table settings, flower arrangements, wine pairings. They'd act like they were hosting royalty instead of just their own children. I always got there early. Not because I wanted to, but because traffic from Queens to Long Island is unpredictable, and I hated walking in late, hearing them whisper about how I never managed her time well. I'd rather sit through awkward small talk than give them another reason to sigh at me. This year felt different, though. Not on the outside. On the outside, it was the same parade of showmanship. My mom wore her pearl earrings. My dad opened some fancy bottle he'd been saving, and my siblings walked in like they owned the world. My brother Jake, fresh off a big merger deal, brought a date who wore red lipstick and laughed like she'd rehearsed it. My sister Lauren talked about her latest paper getting published and the new lab she'd be running at Columbia. My parents beamed with pride, saying things like, "That's our girl, and you always were meant for great things." And me? I poured the water. No one asked what I'd been working on. Not once. Mom did ask if I was still trying that app thing, like it was a phase I'd grow out of. I smiled and said, "Yeah, still trying, because honestly it was easier." Then explaining we were less than 2 weeks from IPO. They laughed when I said I was busy. Too busy to date? Jake asked, grinning like that was the worst thing a woman could be. Lauren added, she's always married to her laptop. My dad shook his head. I just want you to be happy, Emily. You know, real happiness. With a steady job and a partner. That's what matters. I nodded. I've gotten good at that over the years. Nodding, smiling, acting like their words don't land like stones in my chest. Then, right in the middle of dessert, my mom's famous peach cobbler, which I've never liked but always pretend to enjoy, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. But something told me to glance. It was a message from my CFO. Final pre-IPO valuation confirmed. $104 million. SoftBank just signed off. Congrats, Em. I read it 3 times. Then I flipped the phone over, face down on the table, and reached for the cobbler. I don't know why I didn't say anything right then. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was that tiny flicker inside me that wanted to see how far they'd go in pretending I didn't matter. I looked around the table. My mom was showing Jake's date an old photo album. Lauren was explaining her research to Dad, who nodded with his full attention. No one even noticed me checking my phone. No one ever did. And I thought, they have no idea, not a clue that I've built something bigger than all of this. That night, as the conversation swirled around me, full of praise and plans that didn't include me, I stayed quiet. But inside, everything had changed. I wasn't the girl trying anymore. I wasn't the one waiting to be seen. They just didn't know it yet. And the moment they'd finally see, it was coming faster than they could imagine. After dinner that night, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. I wasn't tired, not really. I was just full, not from food, from the weight of everything I didn't say. That text, that number, 104 million, kept flashing. In my head like a light I couldn't switch off. But not a single person in that house asked how I was. Not one. They never ask. Not when I show up early to help set the table. Not when I spend all week preparing just to sit in silence while they pass praise around like it's pie. My siblings get questions. How's the firm? What's your next paper about? Have you talked to the dean yet? It's like everyone leans in when they speak, but with me it's always something shallow. You still living in that tiny apartment? Still single? Still working on your little project? Little, that word. It's sharp in the quietest way. Like they're trying not to sound cruel but can't help themselves. Little project, as if I'm playing house instead of leading a team of engineers and nurses across the country. Used to wonder what would happen if I told them everything. If I laid it all out, start to finish. The years of coding after midnight, the rejections from investors who wouldn't even look me in the eye, the beta testing, the first hospital, who said yes, the second who begged to be onboarded faster, the nights I cried in my kitchen because we were close to payroll and out of money. Would they lean in then? Would they look me in the eye? Would they even believe me? But they never ask. And that silence says more than words ever could. When I was younger, I thought it was because I wasn't interesting, that I just wasn't like them. My brother always had stories about closing deals and flying first class. My sister could talk for hours about her studies, her fellowships, her conferences in Europe. I had code, I had bugs I couldn't fix, and mock-ups that didn't work. So I stopped talking. I learned it was better to ask questions than to answer them. People like to talk about themselves. They light up. And if you're just quiet enough, you can disappear without anyone noticing. That's what I did. For years. And you know what's wild? They didn't even realize I'd gone. I became invisible the moment I didn't fit their plan. When I didn't pick a real profession. When I didn't marry a man with a degree and a corner office. When I didn't go to law school or get a PhD. In their eyes, I was the failed experiment. The one who didn't quite land right. The one they hoped would come around eventually. But I didn't. I built something else instead. Quietly, steadily, out of sight, out of their reach. And sometimes I wonder if I'd played along, if I'd followed their path. Would they have loved me more? Then I remind myself, love that only shows up when you perform a certain way isn't really love at all. It's approval, and approval can vanish. I didn't vanish. I grew, just not where they were, looking. When I was 11, I fell in love with a broken printer. It sounds strange, I know, but there was something magical about taking it apart, piece by piece, figuring out how the gears worked, what was stuck, what needed to be cleaned. I stayed up, half the night in the garage, surrounded by old cables and dust, until I got it working again. That was the moment something clicked in me. It wasn't just about fixing things. It was about solving problems, making sense out of mess. And once I tasted that feeling, I never looked back. While other kids were drawing ponies or trading stickers, I was learning HTML from a library book. I taught myself to code, built websites on our old desktop computer, the one that made a buzzing noise every time it turned on. I loved it. I wasn't the fastest or the best, but I didn't care. I was obsessed. But my parents? They called it just a phase. Every kid plays on the computer, Emily, my mom would say while folding laundry. Maybe try something normal like piano or debate team. So I tried. I did what they wanted, played soccer, joined science club, but my mind always wandered. Back to code. I'd sneak off after dinner to watch tutorials or build little games no one ever played. I was happiest when I was creating something, even if no one else saw it. By the time I was 13, I joined a robotics team at school. I still remember our state finals. We'd worked for months on a rescue bot that could navigate a maze and find a signal. I programmed the sensors, stayed after school almost every day, skipped sleep to get the timing right. The day of the competition, I waited at the gym, looking for my parents in the stands. All the other kids had family there, cheering, clapping, holding signs. But mine didn't come. They said they had an event, something for work, something important. I smiled like it didn't matter. Told my teammates I was fine. But I kept looking at the door, hoping they'd walk in at the last minute. They never did. We took second place that day. I held the medal in my hand all the way home, hoping maybe they'd ask how it went. But when I walked through the door, my mom said, "Don't forget to clean your room," and my dad asked if I'd done my math homework. I still have that medal, by the way. It's in a box in the back of my closet, along with a few broken gadgets and a notebook filled with ideas I was too scared to share. I know some people had parents who showed up to every game, every performance, every award night, and I'm happy for them. Truly. But if you're like me, if you grew up wondering what it would have felt like to be seen, really seen, I just want you to know you're not alone. You're not broken because they didn't notice. You're not less because they didn't clap. You were brilliant before they saw it. You were strong before they said your name. I didn't realize it back then, but those quiet hours in my room, those long nights fixing things no one else could fix, that was where I began. Not in their world, but in mine. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe being a misfit isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a foundation. There was only one person in my family who ever looked at me like I mattered. Her name was Aunt Lorraine. She wasn't like the rest of them. Where everyone else wore polished smiles and kept their emotions in check, Lorraine wore scarves that didn't match and red lipstick even when she had nowhere to go. She laughed too loud. She cried at commercials. She once told me that life's too short to fake your way through it. I was 12 the first time she said that to me, and I never forgot it. She'd been married 3 times. Each time she said, she left when she realized she was shrinking herself to make someone else comfortable. My mother used to whisper about her like she was a cautionary tale, but I looked at her and saw freedom. When she came to family dinners, she always brought something weird. A cake made with lavender, earrings she'd made from old buttons, once even a stray cat she was fostering. And every time I saw her, no. Matter how old I got, her first words were always the same. There she is. You're still the best thing this family ever made. No one else ever said things like that to me. At the last dinner, the one where everything quietly shifted, she sat down next to me without a word and slipped a little envelope into my hand. Inside was a photograph. It was from the robotics competition. Somehow, she'd found a way to be there, even if I didn't see her that day. On the back, she'd written in her neat, swooping handwriting, "Some of us were watching, even when they weren't." That hit me harder than anything my parents had ever said. You know, it's a strange thing to realize that one kind voice can outshine 100 cold ones. All those years when I doubted myself, when I thought maybe I wasn't enough, it was her voice that pulled me back. She was the only adult who didn't try to change me. She didn't push college brochures into my hands or tell me to find a steady man. She asked me what I wanted to build, what I loved, what made me feel alive. When I started CareBridge, she was the first to say, "You're going to change lives, kid." And when I told her I had no investors and no money, she just smiled and said, "Start anyway." She got it. She didn't need charts or numbers to believe in me. She saw the spark. She always had. At that dinner, while everyone was toasting Lauren's research and Jake's new promotion, Lorraine leaned close and whispered, "This is all noise, Emily. You've always been the real thing." And I believed her, not because I needed the validation, but because she wasn't saying it to make me feel better. She was saying it because it was true. Sometimes all it takes is one person who sees your light before you do. If you've ever had someone like that, someone who stood by you when no one else did, tell us in the comments. People need to hear those stories. We don't talk enough about the ones who stayed. The ones who showed up when it was quiet, when there were no trophies, no headlines, no IPO. The ones who clapped for you when no one else knew your name. Lorraine was that for me. Still is. And when everything finally broke open, when the truth about my work came out, it wasn't her face I looked for to see if I'd made it. It was hers I looked at to say, "You were right." And she didn't say, "I told you so." She just smiled, squeezed my hand, and said, "Of course I was." I was working full-time at a health startup when the idea for CareBridge first came to me. It wasn't some big light bulb moment. It started small, like most good things do. We were getting so many calls from patients who couldn't get an appointment, or who had been bounced between doctors, tests, and specialists like they were just names on a clipboard. And I kept thinking, there has to be a better way. I went home one night, sat on my floor with my laptop, and started sketching out a simple idea. What if there was one place where everything came together? A platform where patients could find what they needed quickly, and doctors could focus on care instead of paperwork? I didn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I knew what they'd say. "You're not ready." That's too big. It's been done. I could already hear it, so I kept it quiet. By day, I worked my job. By night, I built. I coded, researched, tested. Some nights I forgot to eat. I slept in short stretches, laptop still warm on the sheets beside me. There was no big team, no funding, no office. Just me and a dream that felt too urgent to ignore. The early days were rough. I pitched to investors. Cold emails, short meetings, long silences. I dressed up, practiced my lines, believed with everything I had. And still, rejection after rejection. They said things like, "You're too early. You need a co-founder. It's not the right time for this space." One man actually said, "You don't really look like a founder." That one stuck with me. 37 times I heard no. 37, I kept track. Not out of bitterness, but because when the yes finally came, I wanted to remember exactly how much it cost me to get there. I used my savings, skipped vacations. I said no to dinners, weddings, birthday trips. Every dollar I didn't spend went into the company, hosting fees, design help, small paid trials. I couldn't afford full-time employees, so I offered interns equity and late-night Slack messages filled with gratitude. My apartment became my office. My friends stopped asking if I was free. Most of them didn't understand why I was working so hard on something that might never take off. I understood. It's hard to explain obsession unless someone's felt it too. But I saw the need. Every time someone told me their mom couldn't get a follow-up visit for 3 months, or that they'd waited 6 hours in an ER just to be sent home with a referral, I knew we had to keep building. That belief carried me. Not success. Not praise. Belief. And finally, after months of working in the dark, we got a call from a small hospital in upstate New York. They'd seen our beta somehow, through a friend of a friend, and wanted to try it. That first trial wasn't perfect. We had bugs. The dashboard froze sometimes. But their patients got in faster. Doctors spent more time with people instead of chasing files. Something was working. And that was all we needed. One hospital. It was the beginning. Most people only see the success. They see the number, the headline, the IPO. What they don't see is the floor I slept on, the 2 a.m. breakdowns, the way I almost gave up more times than I can count. But I didn't. Because even in the quiet, even in the shadows, I knew we were building something real, something that mattered. The first real breakthrough came 6 weeks after that pilot started. I still remember the email from the hospital's operations director. He kept it short, just a few lines, but I read it over and over again like it was a love letter. He said, their patient wait times had dropped by 40%. Appointment no-shows were down. Their patient satisfaction surveys were the highest they'd seen in 2 years. He ended the email with, "We'd like to extend the trial." That's when it hit me. We weren't just trying anymore. We were working. Word started to spread, quietly at first. Other hospitals noticed the changes, asked what system they were using. One by one, calls came in. Not many, but enough to know we were on to something bigger. We signed our second pilot in New Jersey, then a third in Pennsylvania. I couldn't believe it. Every time someone said yes, I felt like I could breathe a little deeper, and that's when the funding followed. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But those early wins gave us proof. I used those metrics like gold in every investor meeting. Every second shaved off a patient wait time, every doctor quote about feeling less burned out. That data opened doors. Doors I'd been banging on for months. We brought on our first full-time hire, a brilliant engineer named Melissa, who understood the mission like it was her own. Then a project manager, a sales lead. I remember each of their names, their first days, the way they looked at me like I was supposed to know what I was doing. The truth is I didn't. Not always. But I showed up. I listened. And I never pretended to have all the answers. Maybe that's why they stayed. Every win felt huge. Our first feature in a medical tech blog. Our first onboarding session with 10 hospitals at once. The first time someone said, "We heard about you through a friend. We were growing, but through all of it, I kept my family in the dark." They knew I was working, but not much else. I didn't offer updates, and they didn't ask. When we moved into our first tiny office space in Brooklyn, I told them I'd found a new co-working spot. When we got our first round of funding, I said I was still freelancing. Why? Because part of me wasn't ready. Not to be doubted, not to be talked down to, and definitely not to be told to be careful right when things were finally taking off. So I stayed quiet. I let them believe I was drifting, still chasing something that might never land. And maybe, in some strange way, I wanted it that way. I wanted to see what it felt like to win without needing them to cheer me on. I told myself I'd share it all one day. That there would be a moment when it made sense to open the curtain. But that moment kept moving further away. Because with every milestone, I realized something important. I didn't need their approval to know I was doing something good. And that was a new feeling for me. Freeing even. They say success changes people. Maybe it does. But for me, success didn't make me louder. It made me steadier. I didn't want to show off. I just wanted to keep building, keep serving, keep proving, not to them, but to myself that this thing I believed in from the very beginning was real. And every new hospital, every new team member, every thank you email from a nurse who felt less alone in her shift, it all said the same thing. You were right to keep going, even in the dark. People think success looks shiny. Big cars, fancy clothes, front row seats, and loud applause. But for me, it looked like something else. It looked like keeping quiet when I wanted to shout. It looked like hiding the best parts of myself just to keep the peace. After we started gaining traction, after the funding rounds and the hospital partnerships and the staff hires, I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn. A small one, nothing over the top. It was the kind of place that needed work. Creaky floors, chipped paint, a kitchen stuck in the 90s. But it was mine. Paid for in full. Every square inch of it was earned. Still, I told my family I was renting a one-bedroom. I didn't lie. To trick them. I lied to protect something, because when people think you're struggling, they leave you alone. But when they think you're winning, they start to reach for things. Opinions, advice, credit they didn't earn. And I wasn't ready for that. So I let them believe I was still scraping by. I drove the same old Honda I'd had for years. Wore jeans and simple blouses to family events. I didn't talk about my work unless someone asked. And they never asked at day. First, it felt strange. Like I was two people, the woman building a company during the week and the still-trying daughter on Sundays. But over time, I got used to it. It became a kind of armor, because some victories need to ripen in silence. Not, everything is meant to be shared too soon. Some dreams are still delicate, still learning how to stand. And when you show them to the wrong people too early, they get crushed. So I kept mine close. There were moments I wanted to tell, like the day we hit 10,000 daily users, or when a major health system said we'd saved them hundreds of hours in just 1 month. I thought about texting my dad, I thought about calling my mom, but I didn't. Because I knew the reaction wouldn't be what I needed. I'd get a lukewarm, "That's nice," or a passive, "Glad it's working out," followed by a story about something my siblings did that they were more proud of, and I wasn't looking for praise. I just didn't want to be made small again. I'd spent so many years learning how to believe in myself without applause, how to show up, even when no one else did. I couldn't risk losing that progress just to be included in a conversation I'd never been invited into in the first place. So I wore the mask. I let them think I was ordinary. It gave me room to grow, in peace. There's a certain power in being underestimated. It gives you space to move, to build without noise, to fail without spectacle. And if you're patient enough, it also gives you the perfect view when it's finally time to show the world what you've built. I didn't know when that moment would come. I didn't plan some big reveal, but I knew one thing. When the truth did come out, it wouldn't need to be loud, it would speak for itself. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles in right before everything changes. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. It's the kind that buzzes under your skin, like a low hum reminding you something big is coming. That's how it felt. In the weeks before the IPO, we were in final talks with SoftBank. Goldman Sachs had started circling. The paperwork was a mile long. Calls, meetings, decisions, lawyers, numbers. I was in deep. So deep that some days I forgot to eat. I'd go from one Zoom call to the next, switching between legal teams and investor decks, trying to keep the whole thing from tipping over. But at night, when the screens went dark and the emails stopped, the questions started. Should I tell them? Should I finally say, "Here I am. This is what I've built. This is what I've done while you weren't looking"? I thought about it constantly. What it would feel like to walk into the brownstone on Sunday and lay it all out. To tell them the number, the partners, the hospitals, the impact. But something always stopped me. Not fear exactly. More like hesitation. A quiet voice in the back of my head that said, "They're not ready, and maybe you aren't either." So I waited. Instead, I poured myself into the final push. I sat with my team late into the night, triple-checking every line of the prospectus. I reread every section, made notes in the margins, caught mistakes no one else did. This was our moment, and I wasn't going to let anything slide. Still, in the middle of all that noise, I needed someone to talk to. So I called Lorraine. It was late. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't say much, just told her I was close, that the IPO was happening soon, that the papers were signed and the lawyers were locked in, and I was scared in a way I hadn't expected. She didn't interrupt. She just let me speak, let me spill everything I'd kept bottled up. When I was done, there was a long pause. Then she said, "They'll see you when it's too late." At first, I didn't know what she meant. It sounded harsh, cold even. But then she added, "Some people can't see you until the world tells them to, until you're in lights, until it's undeniable. They won't get it until it's already done. And that's okay." She was right. I was waiting for a moment that might never come the way I wanted. I was hoping for eyes to light up, for shoulders to turn toward me, for voices to soften. But some people only turn their heads after the parade's already passed. That call gave me clarity. I didn't need a big speech. I didn't need permission to be proud. All I needed was to keep going, to stay focused, to protect what I'd built. The storm was coming, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that uncovers, and I was ready. The night everything came to a head, I knew something was different the moment I walked into the house. There was a strange energy in the air, too polished, too practiced. The dining room table looked like something out of a magazine. Name cards, fresh flowers, expensive wine bottles lined up like trophies. My mom always went over the top, but this was next level. Jake was already there, talking loudly about some deal that had just closed. My dad beamed with pride, hanging on to every word. Lauren walked in a few minutes later, carrying a binder of photos from her lab. My mom took it like it was a sacred book. I sat in my usual seat. No one asked how I was. Dinner started with the usual routine. Toasts, updates. My dad raised a glass for Jake's recent promotion and another for Lauren's new research grant. Everyone clapped. Glasses clinked. Then there was a pause. My mom looked at me, smiled politely, and said, "And of course, Emily is still working on her project. We're proud she's keeping busy." That was it. No questions. No real curiosity. Just a pat-on. The head in the form of a sentence. I nodded and took a sip of water. I didn't need them to know. "Not yet." Then my dad cleared his throat. "We've been doing some estate planning," he said, like it was just another update. "Nothing serious, just getting things in order." Everyone leaned in. "We've decided to leave the house to Lauren," he continued. "And the lake cabin to Jake, since he's always loved it." He glanced at me. "And Emily, well, since you're still figuring things out, we thought it best to wait before making any big decisions regarding your part." The room went silent. I felt heat rise in my face, but I said nothing. I just nodded again, still figuring things out. They really had no idea. Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. But Lorraine, sitting beside me, leaned over and whispered, "Answer it." I hesitated. She gave me that look, the one that said, "This is it." So I stepped out, walked quietly to the hallway, and picked up. It was my CFO. "SoftBank's in," she said. "Signed this morning, 100 million. We're officially greenlit for IPO next quarter." I stood there, holding the phone like it might disappear. I thanked her, hung up, and walked back in. They were still talking when I sat down, laughing, passing dessert. No one noticed anything had changed, but everything had. I looked at Lorraine. She smiled, the smallest, most knowing smile I've ever seen. I didn't say anything, not yet, not because I was afraid, but because something in me wanted to hold the power a little longer. Let them finish their stories. Let them finish deciding who mattered. Because soon, the silence would speak louder than anything I could ever say. Stay with me. What came next surprised even me. I let dessert pass around the table one more time. Peach cobbler again. Always peach cobbler. They talked about real estate, about someone's new kitchen renovation, about stocks and what the market was doing this week. Jake had opinions, of course. Lauren offered smarter ones. My parents nodded, proud to have raised 2 stars. I sat there, letting it all happen. Then Lorraine cleared her throat. "You're awfully quiet tonight, Em," she said, looking straight at me. "Anything new?" She knew exactly what she was doing. Everyone turned to me like it was a formality, like no one expected much. I looked up, and I said, "Actually, yes." The room stilled. I placed my napkin on the table and took a breath. "You know that project I've been working on? It's called Care Bridge. It's a health tech platform I started about 3 years ago. We connect hospitals, doctors, and patients through one integrated system. Faster referrals, quicker appointments, lower wait times. We're already working with over 40 hospitals." The silence was sharp. Jake blinked. Lauren tilted her head, confused. My dad was the first to speak. "That's interesting." I kept going. "We closed a $100 million round this week. SoftBank led. Goldman's coming in for the IPO. We're filing next quarter." You could have heard a pin drop. My mom's fork stopped mid-air. My sister's mouth hung open, like she was trying to understand a language she didn't speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't brag. I just told them the truth. And for the first time in years, they listened. My dad leaned forward, almost cautious. "You started this company yourself?" I nodded. "From scratch. Nights and weekends at first. We've grown fast." Jake's tone shifted. "You're saying you've raised that much money already?" "We don't just raise money," I said. "We make impact, real results, lives changed. CareBridge is built to last." Lauren tried to find something to hold on to. "How did we not know any of this?" I looked at each of them, calm but clear. "You never asked." No one spoke, and for once the silence wasn't mine to carry. They looked at me differently now, not like the disappointment, not like the one still trying. They saw me, and maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not the clapping, not the praise. Just the moment they realized I was never less, just unseen. Now they knew, and the truth echoed through that room louder than any toast ever could. The shift was almost instant. 1 minute, I was the background noise. The next, I was center stage, but not in the way I'd dreamed about when I was younger. Not with joy or pride or overdue recognition. No, this was different. This was strategy. This was the kind of attention that comes when people realize you're holding something valuable. Jake was the first to speak again. His voice had a new tone. Less teasing, more calculated. "You know, I've got a lot of experience negotiating deals," he said, leaning back. "If you ever want help reviewing contracts, I'm happy to take a look." Before I could respond, Lauren jumped in. "You should really think about forming a family trust. It's safer long-term. We could even start a joint fund, pool some assets together, help you grow the company further." My mom smiled, but her eyes were scanning. "You always had big ideas, sweetie. Maybe this is your time. We're so proud, really. Maybe Dad could help. He knows some people in healthcare." My dad, serious now, offered something more direct. "Have you considered forming a board with family seats? Just to help guide you through the IPO? Keep things in the family." It was also fast. Offers, suggestions, advice. They went from dismissing me to trying to manage me in less than 10 minutes. I watched them like I was outside my own body. The same people who laughed at me, ignored me, cut me out of their plans, now suddenly ready to invest, advise, take a seat at the table they never believed I could build. I took a slow breath, and I said, "I appreciate your excitement, but I don't need a board stacked with people who weren't there when it mattered." They all blinked. I wasn't angry, just done pretending. "Support isn't showing up after the spotlight hits," I said. "Support means showing up when it counts. When I was eating rice for dinner 3 nights in a row to keep payroll alive. When I stayed up till 3 a.m. debugging the system alone. When I called investors and got rejected 37 times. That's when I needed support. Jake tried to laugh it off. We didn't know, Em. You kept us out. Because you weren't listening, I said. For years, I was here, showing up, building something from nothing, and none of you asked once what I was doing. Lauren's voice dropped. You're punishing us. No, I said softly. I'm protecting what I built. There was no drama, no yelling, just the quiet kind of truth that settles in deep, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. They didn't push again, not that night. The power had shifted. But more than that, the roles had. I wasn't the one asking for space anymore. I was the one deciding who got to step into mine. And for the first time, I understood something I never had before. Success isn't just about proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about choosing who gets to sit beside you once you do. After dinner, Lorraine and I sat on the front steps of the brownstone. It was quiet out there, just the hum of streetlights and the faint sound of dishes clinking inside. She passed me a mug of tea she somehow snuck out without anyone noticing. Chamomile, just how I liked it. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then she looked at me and said, "That room never deserved your truth." It hit me harder than I expected, because deep down that's exactly what I'd been feeling all along, but I hadn't found the words. I'd spent so many years trying to shrink myself to fit into a family that only saw value in mirrors of themselves. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that when they finally saw what I'd done, they'd look at me differently, that they'd soften, that something would shift. But what I got wasn't real understanding. It was calculation. It was positioning. It was too late. Lorraine saw it. She always did. They clapped for the numbers, she said, not the journey. I nodded. And you know what? That's okay, she added. Because what you've built, who you've become, you didn't do it for them. You did it despite them. That part stuck. Despite them. I'd done all of it without their approval, their praise, their help. And while some part of me still ached for their pride, a bigger part finally understood I didn't need it to keep going. What I needed was peace. We talked for a long time that night. About everything. The early days, the late nights, the rejections, the small wins that felt huge because no one else saw them. I told her about the first time a patient sent a thank you message saying CareBridge helped their mom get an appointment just in time to catch a serious illness early. That message had nothing to do with money or fame or success. It was about impact. It was about why I started in the first place. Lorraine listened the way she always did. Fully, without interrupting, without trying to fix it. She didn't ask for numbers. She didn't talk about strategy. She just said, "That's the real story." And she was right. Because behind the IPOs and the headlines and the valuation was something more meaningful. A story of someone who was overlooked, who kept going anyway, who built quietly in the shadows, not to prove others wrong, but to build something that mattered. And now, standing in the light of it all, I realized something else. I wouldn't trade the path I took. Not the hard parts, not the silence, not even the years I felt invisible. Because that path shaped me. It taught me to listen to my own voice, to believe in something no one else saw, to value my own progress, even when no one clapped, and that's something no applause can replace. If you've ever felt like people only valued you after your success, after you had something shiny to show them, I want you to know, you're not alone, you're not invisible. Your story matters. Tell it, because someone else needs to hear it. The morning after that dinner, my phone started lighting up in a way it never had before. First, a message from my mom. "So proud of you. Let's do lunch soon. Just us." Then from Jake. "Crazy night. Would love to pick your brain about scaling. A team. Drinks next week?" Lauren sent a text that just said, "Let's catch up. I'm free Thursday." It would have felt surreal if I hadn't expected it. When people realize you're holding something valuable, they suddenly remember your Number. They remember how to be nice. They try to find the version of you that fits into their world again. Just this time, with a little more respect. But I wasn't the same version anymore. So I sat with the messages for a while. I didn't respond. Right away. Not because I was angry, but because I wanted to make sure my response came from the right place. Not from the sting of being ignored for years, not from the high of being finally seen, but from the clarity I'd earned the hard way. I wrote back to my mom first. Thanks for the message. I'm always open to reconnecting, but I need honesty. To be part of the table now. No roles, no masks. She didn't reply right away. Jake's message came next. I told him, glad you're interested. I'm happy to talk business, but please know my time is protected now. I'm not in a place to offer casual advice over drinks. And Lauren, I simply said, happy to talk. Just know I've changed. The version you used to see isn't coming to this conversation. It wasn't mean. It wasn't bitter. It was clear, and that was new for me. For so long, I'd stayed soft around them, shrunk myself to be easier to love. I'd made myself small to avoid tension. But now I wasn't trying to fit. I was just being. And with that came boundaries, not walls. Not revenge, just a gentle reminder that access to me now came with something I never demanded before. Respect. Some of them handled it well. Some didn't reply right away. Some tried again with softer words. And that's okay. Because this wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about protecting the version of me I fought to become. The one who showed up for herself, even when no one else did. The one who stopped performing, stopped explaining, stopped needing the room to agree with her in order to feel real. And it was also about grace. I wasn't angry. I was awake. They could come back if they wanted, but only on honest terms. Not for the press, not for the headlines, not for what they could gain, only for what could finally be true. That's the difference between boundaries and bitterness. Bitterness keeps the door locked. Boundaries say, the door is open, but only if you come with love. You ever have a moment when you realize you've been chasing something that was never yours to catch? That was me, sitting on a worn-out couch in my therapist's office, hands clenched, heart racing, trying to explain why a dinner with my family had left me feeling like I was 12 again. It wasn't the first session. I'd been going for a few months by then. At first, I thought therapy was just something successful people did to seem well-rounded. But deep down, I was tired. Tired of carrying all the things I never said out loud. Tired of performing peace when I was quietly breaking. And somewhere between one quiet Tuesday and another, I started telling the truth. I told her about the dinners, the silences, the way my siblings' successes were served like appetizers, and mine was more like a forgotten dish that never made it to the table. I told her about building a company, in the dark. About the rejections, the nights alone, the moments I wondered if I was enough. And I told her about the IPO, the success, the shift. And how even after all that, I still wanted them to see me. She listened the way good therapists do, without jumping in, without trying to fix it, just letting the truth float there for a bit before asking one question. What would it mean if they never did? That stopped me, because I had never let myself ask that before. What if they never clapped? What if they never leaned in? What if they kept seeing me through the same old lens, no matter how clearly I spoke? She said, healing isn't about getting them to understand. It's about understanding yourself enough that they no longer have the power to define your story. I sat with that for weeks because I'd been working so hard to prove my worth, not just in business, but in the eyes of people who couldn't or wouldn't see me fully. But therapy helped me see something different. Worth isn't something you earn from someone else. It's something you come home to. I started writing down things I used to hide. Like how I used to stay quiet at dinner because I thought speaking up would only lead to disappointment. Like how I'd overwork myself to prove I wasn't lazy. Like how I'd laugh at jokes that hurt because calling them out felt lonely. And I began to unravel that knot of shame that formed every time I felt invisible. Because it wasn't mine. It was theirs. Their expectations. Their narrow views. Their inability to celebrate a path that didn't look like theirs. It took time. I still flinched sometimes when a message came in from my dad, still hesitated before responding to my mom. But now I could name the feeling instead of burying it. That's what healing looks like. Not perfection, clarity. It's not about standing on a stage with a mic and demanding applause. It's about sitting in silence and knowing who you are, even if no one else claps. It's about recognizing that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means letting go of the version of them you were trying to change. And the most powerful thing I learned? They don't have to understand to no longer have power. That sentence lived in me. It gave me breath on days when old patterns tried to creep back in. It gave me strength when I felt the urge to explain myself again. And it gave me freedom from the loop I'd been stuck in for far too long. Healing isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's not always visible from the outside. But it's real. And sometimes that quiet healing is the most powerful thing of all. You'd think that after ringing the bell on Wall Street, everything would slow down, that the noise would fade, the calendar would open up, and maybe, just maybe, I'd finally feel like I'd arrived. But the truth is, that's when it all sped up. We went from 30 hospitals to 400 in less than 8 months. 30,000 patients a day. I still can't wrap my head around that number sometimes. That's not just software. That's lives. Real people. Families. Nurses who get to go home a little earlier. Patients who get a diagnosis before it's too late. Caregivers who don't have to spend hours on the phone navigating a broken system. The headlines didn't talk about that, though. They wanted sound bites. They wanted the photo of me smiling in front of a digital ticker. They wanted quotes about disruption and market share. They wanted me to tell the story like it was a fairy tale. How one woman went from outsider to industry star. But that's not my story. So I stopped giving them what they wanted. Every time I sat down with a reporter, I redirected the spotlight. I talked about frontline staff who used CareBridge to flag critical alerts faster than their hospital's internal system. I mentioned the small-town clinics that finally felt like they had access to big city tools. I spoke about families who wrote in, thanking us for giving them time back, actual time, with their loved ones. Sometimes their eyes glazed over. Sometimes they tried to steer me back to the founder journey, as if the most interesting thing about our work was me. But I knew better. This wasn't about me anymore. Yes, I started it. Yes, I poured everything I had into it. But the story now belongs to the people it touches. That's what matters. And that clarity? That's what made me a force. Not the money. Not the fame. Not the validation from people who used to ignore me. It was the moment I realized I didn't need to be the star of the story. I just needed to protect the mission. Of course, there were still plenty of offers. TV interviews, speaking tours. A book deal someone wanted to ghostwrite for me. A chance to be the face of female founders in health tech. But I said no to most of them because I knew the cost. The more attention I took, the more noise would follow. And noise distracts from impact. Instead, I built a leadership team with people smarter than me, people who challenged my ideas, who cared more about service than spotlight. We started an internal patient experience council led by real patients and caregivers. We funded community health initiatives quietly, without press releases, because this was never about the headline. It was about the ripple. One system changed, one nurse relieved, one patient heard. And now, all these years later, when people ask what I'm most proud of, I don't say the IPO. I say the 2 a.m. text from a doctor in Ohio who said our platform helped him stay with a dying patient a little longer because the paperwork had already been handled. Say the mom who wrote in to say our app helped her get her daughter's surgery scheduled in time and saved her life. That's what I built. That's what I fought for in the dark when no one believed in me. And now that the lights are on, I'm not stepping into them just to shine. I'm stepping forward to make sure others get the same chance. Because success is loud, but service is steady, quiet, deep, and that's where I'll always stand. You know that moment when someone asks you a simple question and it takes your breath away, not because it's hard, but because the answer is finally clear? That happened to me on the day we launched the Carter Foundation. It was a sunny Thursday, in spring. We were in a small community center in Brooklyn, nothing flashy. A few local reporters, some teachers. A handful of students, mostly girls from public schools, their eyes wide, their curiosity bigger than the room could hold. We'd worked for months on the launch. The foundation's mission was simple. Fund programs that help girls in underserved. Communities explore science, technology, engineering, and math. Give them computers, pay for classes, get them mentors. Show them that they belong in every lab, every pitch room, every code sprint. Because I remembered what it felt like to not see anyone who looked like me in the spaces I wanted to be. I remembered what it felt like to build alone, to dream quietly, to hope someone, anyone, would see what I saw. So we built something to change that. The Carter Foundation was my answer. But that day, after the speech, after the pictures, after we handed out the first round of scholarships, a young journalist came up to me and asked, "So, Carter, is that named after your family?" She smiled like it was a compliment, like she expected me to say, "Yes, of course," and talk about my proud lineage and the legacy I came from. But I just looked at her, smiled back, and said, "No, it's named after me." She blinked, a little confused. So I added, "The family didn't build this." I did. And I watched as she scribbled something in her notebook, nodding slowly, maybe understanding more than I expected. Because for so long, the name Carter felt like something I had to live up to. A shadow I couldn't escape. A script I was supposed to follow, Ivy League schools, corporate jobs, a husband with a good title, kids who say please and thank you and get into the right preschool by age 3. But that wasn't my path. My version of the name was different. It meant staying up until sunrise trying to fix a broken line of code. It meant betting on a dream that no one else saw. It meant silence at dinner tables and victories no one clapped for. It meant building in the dark and trusting the light would come, and when it did, I didn't want to use it to build a higher wall. I wanted to build a longer table. That's what the foundation is, a way to reach back while still moving forward, a place where girls who've been told they don't look like engineers or aren't math people can see someone who did it anyway and know they can too. We've already funded robotics kits for middle schoolers. We've partnered with universities for summer STEM camps. And next fall, we're launching our first Mentor Match program, connecting girls with women in tech, one-on-one, month by month, because legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about who you lift while you're still here. And no, I didn't build it for the family name. I built it for every girl who sits quietly in a classroom, unsure if she belongs. For the ones who build bridges out of scraps and turn pain into power. For the ones like me. Christmas came around faster than I expected. The first snowfall hit early that year, coating the city in that kind of quiet only fresh snow brings. I watched it from the office window, the glow of the streetlights casting soft shadows across the floor of our HQ. It was peaceful, still, and yet I could feel something shifting again. A few weeks earlier, I'd sent out a quiet invitation. No announcement, no speeches, just a short message to my dad. If you'd like to visit the office sometime, let me know. It's open. I didn't expect a response. but he said yes. He came the following Wednesday, right at noon. I offered to send a car, but he took the train. Said he wanted to see the city the way I did. That surprised me. When he stepped into our lobby, he paused, looked around at the soft wood paneling, the framed photos of hospital teams using our platform, the wall of handwritten notes from patients and nurses. He didn't speak right away. He just took it in. I gave him the tour, showed him the operations wing, the dev team's space, the quiet room we built for when work gets overwhelming. He asked thoughtful questions, listened more than he talked. And when we reached the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall, the one with the CareBridge logo etched into the door, he stopped. "This is bigger than I imagined," he said quietly. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. He wasn't glowing with pride. He looked humbled, like something in him had shifted too. "I was wrong not to ask," he added. "Not just about your work, about you." That's when I knew things had changed, not because of the size of the office or the number in the bank, but because for the first time he saw me without trying to fix me, and I let that moment sit. So when Christmas dinner came, I went. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because I wanted to, for myself. I arrived late, not rude late. Just my pace. Brought dessert, the kind I liked, not the one they always requested. I wore what made me feel good. I stayed for exactly 2 hours. We talked, not about business, just about music, snow, holiday movies, little things. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses and moments where old habits tried to creep. But this time I had terms. I didn't explain myself. I didn't stay longer just to make everyone comfortable. I didn't let their discomfort become my responsibility. And when it was time to leave, I stood up, hugged who I wanted to hug, and said, "Thank you for dinner. I'll see you soon." No one questioned it. And that was the quiet victory. Sometimes, reconnection doesn't come with big apologies or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it's just a visit, a tour, a conversation, a shorter dinner. It's choosing to come back, not because you need them to see you, but because you finally see yourself, and in that seeing you create space. Space to forgive, space to protect, space to return, but only on your terms. I used to think someone had to pick you for your story to matter, that someone had to say, "You belong here," before you could truly believe it yourself. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe a boss, maybe your family at the dinner table. I waited a long time for that kind of permission. But here's the truth. No one told me, "You don't have to be chosen to be worthy." I said that out loud recently, standing in front of a group of young coders at a tech camp in Brooklyn. They were fresh-faced, bright-eyed, most of them still in high school. They reminded me of myself at that age, full of ideas, full of questions, and quietly wondering if they were good enough to build something real. I looked around the room and saw kids who didn't fit the founder mold. A girl in a wheelchair who had redesigned a medical alert app for her brother. A kid who worked after school at a deli to save for his first laptop. A boy who'd been told he was too quiet, too slow, too soft to lead. They were all still waiting to be seen. I didn't give them a list of tips. I didn't tell them how to write the perfect pitch deck or scale a team. I told them my story, the part most people skip, the part where it's hard, where no one claps, where you build something in the dark with nothing but belief holding you up. And then I said, build something so honest it doesn't need approval. They looked at me like they didn't quite know what that meant. So I explained. Honest doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean flawless code or a polished website. It means real. It means built from something you actually care about. Not because it's trendy. Not because it'll impress your classmates or your parents. But because it solves a problem you understand better than anyone else. I told them about the early days of CareBridge, about the bugs, the long nights, the times we thought it might fall apart. I told them I didn't start with a big plan. I Started with a problem that made me angry and a belief that we could fix it, and that belief was honest. That's what made people eventually notice. Not the pitch, not the brand colors, the honesty. I could see something shift in them as I spoke. Their shoulders relaxed. A few started taking notes. One girl in the front row wiped a tear from her cheek when I said, "You are not behind. You are just beginning." Because that's the hardest part, right? Starting. Especially when no one's looking. Especially when it feels like the world only notices the loud ones, the glossy ones, the ones who already have connections or perfect LinkedIn profiles. But the world needs more quiet builders, more thoughtful problem solvers, more people who know what it's like to be overlooked, and who turn that into fuel instead of fear. At the end of the talk, a boy with a laptop covered in duct tape came up to me. He said, "I didn't think I belonged here until today." I smiled and said, "You already belong. Now go build something they can't ignore." So to the ones still waiting to be seen, don't wait. Not for permission, not for applause, not for the perfect moment. Start now, start small, and build something. So honest, so real, it can stand even if no one claps. You don't have to be chosen, you just have to begin. Funny how quiet the city feels when you're standing above it. I was on the roof that night looking out over Brooklyn. Lights blinking, cars passing below, a world that kept moving whether people saw you or not. I had a blanket wrapped around me, a glass of something warm in my hand, and a kind of peace I hadn't known before. My phone buzzed on the railing beside me. I almost didn't check it, but something in me said I should. It was a message from my expansion team. UK deal signed. First pilot next month. I smiled, not the kind of smile you force, the kind that just arrives. Quiet. Sure. Like something inside you finally exhaled. It's hard to explain what that moment meant. To someone else, it might have just looked like another business win, another checkbox on a long list. But for me, it was proof. Proof that something I built, something that started in silence, in doubt, in late nights and loneliness, had crossed oceans. That somewhere across the Atlantic, people would soon be using a system that grew from a girl who once fixed broken printers in her garage. A girl who was told to be realistic, who was told to be more like her siblings, who was told not now, maybe later, or worse, that's not for you, but it was for me. It always was. I just had to keep going long enough to prove it. I leaned on the railing and watched the skyline for a while. No headlines, no applause. Just me and the hum of the world below. And I thought about all the people who never saw me coming. Not out of spite, but because they didn't know how to see anything that didn't fit their mold. They once cut me off, said I didn't have direction, that I hadn't found my path yet, that maybe someday I'd get it. Together. And now, I define where I begin. Not because of their belief, but because I stopped waiting for it. That's the thing about justice. It doesn't always come loud. It doesn't always knock on the front door or show up with a big dramatic reveal. Sometimes, justice is quiet. It's a text on a rooftop. It's a breath you take when no one's watching. It's the soft, steady truth that rises when everything else falls away. It's living the life they thought you never could, and not needing them to see it in order to feel it. I didn't build Carebridge to get back at anyone. I built it because the world needed it, because people were waiting for something better, and because deep down, I was too. Better care, better connection, a better way of being seen. That mission saved me, gave me purpose. And now, it's giving others a path forward, too. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of full circle. So if you're still in the shadows, still building, still trying, still wondering if anyone will ever understand what you're working toward, I hope this finds you. Keep going, not for them, for you, because you never know which quiet moment will change everything. For stories like this, subscribe. There's more to tell.